Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Akansha and this is a video on how to survive higher English. So I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks on doing higher English. I just want to say I didn't actually sit the exam because I was in one of the COVID years, but we did do kind of the exam in a setting in school, obviously not with invigilators, with our teachers. So just to clarify that, and I also got an A in higher English, but I also did Advanced Higher English, so I hope these tips help you. So without further ado, let's just get started. I always like to do a course spec breakdown because I think it's really important to know kind of the aspects of the course and the aspects that you're studying. So if we start with, there are two components to the actual exam. So you sit two exams for higher English. I'm pretty sure they are on the same day. I'll put a wee picture here of what time they were last year. So there's an RUAE paper, which is an unseen two passages that you have to answer questions on, and that lasts 1 hour and 30 minutes, and that's 30 marks. And then you have a question paper, which is critical reading, and that's 40 marks, and that's 1 hour 30 minutes as well. And that's when you answer questions on a Scottish set text that you study. So that could be a play, that could be a set of poems that could come up, or one poem out of the set that you studied of a specific author, such as specific poet, such as like Caroline Duffy, Liz Lockhead, and then you write an essay on a text or a film or play that you've studied. So there's kind of two components to the critical reading paper, if that makes sense. So you have an RUA paper and you have a critical reading paper, and those are the two papers that you sit. So those are the two exams that you sit. And one is 40 marks and one is 30 marks. And then you have a portfolio.
Doing a voiceover because I said something wrong, so there's only one portfolio writing piece and it's either broadly creative and or discursive. It's 15 marks, but it's doubled to reflect the 30 marks.
Is a little bit different this year. They've implemented some measures to kind of deal with people's potentially using AI, but I'll talk about that in a wee bit. And that's 30 marks. So, and there's an aspect to the course that's like performance, spoken language, but that's, I think your teacher just puts that down as achieved, not achieved, so it's nothing, you're not going to mark in that. It's basically, I think, to see if you've been participating in class. That's really it. From what I can recall, the kind of jump from Nat 5 to higher is kind of in your analysis of questions. You kind of get less marks for just like kind of providing quotes. You kind of have to provide a bit more analysis. You also might be wondering, where did I get all this information? So this information is in the Higher English course specification, which I will link down below. It's on the SQA website and it has literally everything that you need to know about the course and how it's assessed. So if you're interested, you could always give that a read. What is kind of different this year is it says here that when candidates are ready to complete the first draft of the assessment piece, this must be done in class under the supervision of a teacher or lecturer and with access to appropriate resources, for example notes, outline plan, research, etc, etc. And then following feedback, then candidates complete the final piece of writing under some supervision and control, and then the only thing that's put forward for marking is your final piece. And I think this is to do with kind of worries about students using AI, about plagiarism, and I would really encourage you to talk with your teacher or lecturer, whoever you have, to figure out how they're doing it. I assume it is kind of like everybody have your plan ready for a first draft. We're all going to write it together in class, and then everyone gets feedback or whatever, and then you all have a time where you write the final draft. I obviously have not experienced that, so I don't really have any tips for it, which is a bit unfortunate. But I would try not to stress about it too much. You don't stress about it in the first draft in class, I would say, too much, because you do have access to your notes. If you have a good, decent plan that you can follow, then hopefully it wouldn't be too hard. But yeah, it's a bit different, and I don't think anything like this has kind of been done before, so good luck for that. My first tip is kind of basic. It would be follow the structure that your teachers gave you. And what I mean about that is your teacher gives you a structure that every paragraph in your critical essay should follow. Would be to follow what your teacher has gave you. So say you're using the peer method, so point, example, explanation, refer back to the question. You'll be using that for every single paragraph in your critical essay, and I'd say use that because it's really easy then for the examiner to tick off the marks. You don't want to confuse them. They always say kind of don't memorize essays. I do know a few people who did memorize their essays for higher English. I'm not going to warn you against that, warn you towards it. You can figure out what you want to do. Honestly, I think the questions at higher English are kind of similar things every year, so you can see a pattern of what are the most likely things that they can ask you, so you can prepare essays for that. If you're not especially inclined to English and you don't want to spend hours thinking about all the texts, especially when you've got other subjects, you might only be doing higher English because you need it for uni or it looks good on your CV, because it's one of those kind of basic subjects that everyone has to do. So if you're not interested that much in it, then I do see why you wouldn't be as like enthused about writing, especially when you've got 5 other subjects, however many other subjects you're doing and other things you're doing. It's quite a lot to balance. I would say memorize the introduction, because the introduction is like going to be almost exactly the same for every essay. Things like mention the author, the genre, a summary, those are things that will just come up in every single essay, so I would just have them try and memorize them so it feels like clockwork when you're in the exam, and it helps you get into the flow of writing as well. You know that this is something that's going to come up, you're going to write it, and it's going to be all okay, and it will help calm your nerves. And you can, to a certain extent, also memorize the conclusion, because it is kind of similar things again that will be being mentioned, but obviously it will be a bit different for each question that you write an answer to. The second tip is for RUAE, which I know some people find quite tough. I would say for RUAE, what I would always do is is you just read the whole passage without even looking at the questions, because the questions can seem overwhelming when you haven't read the entire passage. I say that because it gives you like 5-10 minutes to just kind of also like gather your thoughts and settle your nerves, because it can be quite intimidating and daunting going into the exam hall, and that time is inbuilt, an hour and 30 minutes to do all of that. Like I would personally, I would have a bit of time left over even with reading the passage first. And if you have kind of extra support that you need, please talk to your teacher. They can implement things to maybe let you have a bit longer in the exam, but I think the exam time that you're given, it is inbuilt in the exam time for you to read the whole passage first. And I would ignore the second passage, like don't even get to the second passage. So don't look at any of the questions, read the whole passage first, try to understand it, and just get a general gist for it. I say this because in the questions, it always says reads lines 1 to 11, and then take from there and answer from there. That's all fine, but if you're on the 4th question, something in that paragraph of the passage might link back to a paragraph in the first passage. The first paragraph in the passage, because what these authors are doing, they're a lot of the times they're opinion pieces, so it'll be different points in each paragraph, but they will link together at the end, and there will be questions kind of on that general idea, if that makes sense, because each question exists in the context of what came before it, so the paragraphs that came before it and the paragraphs that will come after it, and there will be questions that will ask you to relate your answer to the wider kind of meaning or the wider point that the author is trying to make. So I would say read the whole passage first. I also say past papers are the best way to practice, same for RUAE, but if you've done an RUAE paper, you can't necessarily really do it again unless you find out kind of maybe really, really difficult and you want to go over it. So I always say, what I always did was I'd analyse kind of my own RUA papers. So if you go on the Guardian website, there's loads of kind of articles there that are opinion pieces. And I think in the RUA papers years before, they have used Guardian articles, I think. And a lot of the times they're opinion pieces, and opinion pieces are used quite a lot in RUA, I would say. And so then if you just read a Guardian article or whatever article you find, what in a field that maybe you're even interested in, to make it a bit more bearable. So like, say you're really into pop music, or you're really into Taylor Swift, you could read an opinion piece on why she's the greatest pop artist right now, or maybe why someone disagrees with that, and then try and pick out techniques in it. So how does this author use word choice? How would you put this sentence in your own words? Things like that. And that will really help you if you kind of ran out of past papers. So kind of like making your own RUA questions. I would say my third tip, or like my tips on critical essay writing and the Scottish text, tips on remembering quotes. There's quite a lot of quotes that you kind of have to remember. What I would say is when you go into the exam hall and you get that sheet of paper, the first thing, whoops, I almost put my matcha there, oops. The thing I would always do is kind of write down the quotes that I know I'm going to use, and try and select quotes that you think will be applicable to many different questions. And your teacher will probably guide you with that. Like, they will give you quotes that will fit different types of questions for essay writing. So remembering them, I would record myself saying them, which can be a bit icky sometimes to listen back to your own voice, but I would just replay them over and over again like a podcast on the walk to school. I'd have them in flashcards, quiz yourself, get your friends to quiz you. I would put a flashcard on like the top stair or the bottom stair, and I would look, I'd flip it over, and if I can't get the quote, then I can't go upstairs, so I'd stand there until I could recite the quote, which maybe sounds a bit extreme, but this was in the depths of exam season, so I don't know, I did that technique, and I did it in Advanced Higher as well, and I managed to remember all my quotes. So maybe you don't want to go that extreme, but yeah, asking family members to help you, doing things like that, I think are good. I also think for longer quotes, remembering trigger words. So if you remember the first word or the first two words and the last word or the last few words, I think that always helps me kind of, then it triggers the kind of your brain to remember the rest of the quote. My tip 4 is to read widely. I kind of mean try and read things in the news to try to extend your vocabulary, try and read. I know that's not everyone's preferred way of kind of consuming media. I really like to read, so for me that kind of wasn't an issue. But even things like reading on in areas that you like, so say you really like football, maybe in addition to watching the highlights of a match, you can go in and look up BBC Sports. There will be a journalist covering the kind of breakdown of the match, and it'll be in a written format, so it'll help you get used to reading. Or if you really like songs, I think what I always done, and I found it was fun, and maybe that says something about me, because maybe that sounds really sad, but I would love to analyse songs like poems, pick out word choice, pick out different techniques like similes and metaphors that the singer uses, and see why they used it. And if it's a singer you know a lot about, then it might be easier to do that for that song, and then you can try and apply the same techniques and practice those techniques and familiar things to then go and analyse a Liz Lockhead poem. Also, just some miscellaneous tips. Try and get things marked by your teacher. There's kind of no point practicing and writing if you're not going to get it marked most of the time, at least, because that's where you get the feedback. That's where your teacher can go, oh, that point maybe would be made better if you express it in a different way. And then peer marking as well. I would give it to my friends to mark. Try and mark it on your own as well. But English is kind of a difficult subject because there's not really a right or wrong answer. Like in biology, like you either got it or you don't got it. In maths, you either get the right answer or you don't have the right answer. So English is a bit more subjective that way. But I would say that. Do practice papers under timed conditions. Once you have the knowledge and once you're able to kind of grasp how to write your answers, you have to practice them timed, because you are under time pressure and you need to kind of get used to writing really fast, kind of trying to formulating your thoughts quickly, and I'd say that's more kind of in the critical essay rather than RUAE. I always found RUAE that I had enough time to think through my answers and write them down, because you're answering questions, you're not just writing as kind of fast as you can in the essay. So I would definitely practice for any subject, practice timed past papers, because it's all good and well like writing a really great essay, but if it takes you longer than the time you have in the exam, then it's kind of not beneficial. And I'd also say think about what you want to start with. So in that critical essay exam and the Scottish text, do you think you're better off writing the critical essay first because you've got your quotes memorised, or do you think you're better off going to the Scottish set text and maybe getting into the flow of writing? I would say you can do it anyway, just be organised and make sure to write the kind of number of the question you're answering in the right place. I will also link down many resources down below. There's YouTube, BBC Bite Size, that's great. I'll put some past papers down below as well. There's some great YouTube channels that explain different methods of answering questions and different methods of writing essays, so one of them might gel with you better than what your teacher has explained. So have a look at them if you're stuck for kind of inspiration, or if you don't understand the technique and you can't reach your teacher when you're studying. Also, I would go through the past paper when you're practicing and make sure you're answering the right question, because in Higher English you're obviously picking a question to answer in the critical essay, and not all of them might be relevant to the text that you're studying. So I'll show you an example. Let's look at the 2024 critical reading. So it says section 1 Scottish text, read an extract from Scottish text you have previously studied and attempt the questions. So in that, it's pretty straightforward. If you don't recognise the text or the author, then you shouldn't really be answering it because you've not studied it. That's pretty straightforward, but in an exam situation you can get quite nervous. But the kind of harder bit, sorry, I'm a bit close. The harder bit is in the critical essay section, because it says attempt one question from the following 5 genres: drama, prose, have a fiction and non-fiction section, poetry, film and television, drama or language. So there's quite a lot there. So you will know what you're covering before. So if you've covered a short story that's fiction, for example, we did the yellow wallpaper, I am ignoring everything that says drama, everything that says film. I really don't care about that. That's just things I don't need to be reading. So I'm going to scroll all the way down, and it's a lot. It's quite a hefty paper, and I'll put it up on the screen. So section 2, critical essay, I'm ignoring drama. I'm already on prose, right? Prose is the second one. So I'm going to prose fiction, and then I'm selecting a question. There will definitely be a question that relates, hopefully 100%, and you don't have to think too much about making a connection, but if not, at least partially, that you can kind of write an essay about. But just don't look at anything else, go to your section, know your section that you need to go to before. So if you're doing a film, then we shouldn't be answering a question on poetry, but it is easily done, because I had a teacher in school and she did higher history and she answered the totally wrong question in her essay, and then I think she managed to pass, but that's not what she was aiming for. She was aiming for an A. So like, that's a simple thing that it's like a really silly mistake to make, but it's easy to make because you're under time pressure, and I've been mistakes like that before. But when you practice time past papers, at least you're making that mistake not on exam day when you're really nervous. You're making it 4 months in advance, so you know now not to make that mistake.
So, studying English at St Andrews University has been a very difficult thing for me. I think it is just incredibly hard, but I think it is very rewarding, especially if you enjoy delving into like the really big depths of authorship, of word choice. I think my best thing, genuinely, and I think everyone will tell you this, the biggest recommendation I can give any single person is to read a lot and read English classics, read ancient literature, read everything you can under the sun, because I know every single English teacher will tell you this, but reading is the only way that you will learn more and that you will expand your vocabulary. Because one thing I found is when I went to university and I went away on my own, I had to write my first essay, I was really struggling to find the correct academic language. And I think the most important thing is you focus a lot on writing creatively in school, and I think at university you have to focus on academic language. So basically my advice is just to read all the difficult works and even go on Spark Notes and read. Genuinely read, not because you have to, but read because you want to. Read because you want to expand your vocabulary, because you want to learn something more. I think literature often has a wider message, and I think that's what you should focus on.
And good luck, and remember to take breaks when you're studying, go out for walks, spend time with your friends and family as well. And at the end of the day, these are just your high school exams. They are important, but they're not the be all or end all, and I'll put some resources down below as well if you feel like you're struggling with your mental health. But yeah, thank you for watching. Bye bye.